Welcome back to the Purpose Over Profits podcast. I'm Jim Floyd, owner of Ascent Total Performance.
And I'm Jeremy Powers, owner of Powers Insurance Experts.
Today we have the pleasure of having my good friend Chuck Underhill in the studio. So welcome, Chuck.
Thanks. Appreciate it, guys.
So before we get really diving into business stuff, I just want to tell us a little bit about your background, kind of where you work, what you do in the community.
Yeah. So my name's Chuck Underhill. We're from West Columbia, South Carolina. My wife and I, we have 3 kids, and I work for a company called House of Raeford, and we are a top 10 poultry producer domestically in the United States. I guess domestically means United States. So
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I tell you what, if anyone wants to complain about what they do, I know there's going to be some joyous moments, but man, like I got to go to the chicken coop when I wake up.
No, there's certainly people that do that, but you know what's nice about the size of large poultry production is that you partner with family farms, and those folks do their part of it, and then we do the processing part of it, which is probably the least glamorous side. But.
Yeah. So I think the reason why we wanted to really come on here, besides you just being an awesome dude, is you do a lot of community relation type of stuff for your company. And I think that's a really powerful thing that we can all do as business owners and being involved in the community that we serve. And so I'd love for us to be able to dive into that stuff. And so how do you all identify opportunities, and what's the reasoning why behind what you're doing, and really just kind of diving in to why your company chooses to approach things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So House of Raeford's we're a privately held company by a family in Eastern North Carolina, the Johnson family. And, actually, Jeremy, before we came on, we're kind of talking about things being born out of difficulty, situations happening. And Flock is the name of our nonprofit that I help manage locally here. Each one of our complexes has somebody that does that, or a team of people that do that. And Flock stands for Faithful Love Offering for Christ's Kingdom. And the initial thrust of purpose behind that really came out of tragedy in the Johnson family. They lost a son tragically.
Oh, wow.
And their response was one of just responding to the Lord and saying, we feel like we're probably being called to do more than what we are doing, that we should maybe be expected to do more than what we are doing. And so what came out of that was this idea that turned into a ministry to partner with and be present in our communities. And certainly the size of House of Raeford would lend itself to be this company that would maybe do large scale involvement with large scale ministries, maybe multinational, national at the very least. And I'm not saying that we don't do that in some respects, but for most of our company, what we do is we focus on how we can be very specific with our dollars and our investments into small or mid-sized ministries, depending on what they're doing. And we'd really like to focus on kids' involvement, whether it's helping through scholarships or for allowing for the investment that maybe not be there if somebody doesn't come along and assist, rehab and rehabilitation services, missions teams, church involvement, and everything in between. I mean, there really is no when it comes to people who approach us or people that we approach to be partners with. But, a great example is Mission Lexington that we've had an ongoing relationship with now for probably a decade, Wow. And it's been like buying a bus, or it's been like donating food, and it's everything in between. And so we really work with the relationships that come to us very organically to say, how can we best be a partner with you because you align with really our mission, which is to take our community and invest in a way that makes our community better.
And so it sounds like this isn't something that started yesterday. This is something that's been going on for a little while. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the starting? Because we've got an organization that's obviously already running well. Mm-hmm. You bring in this second operation, which is awesome. I mean, it's outstanding from everything that I've heard so far. Can you talk about a little bit of the start of that versus where it is today?
I can't personally speak too much to that. I know the stories of that process, and certainly it started far more local to our Eastern North Carolina operation because that's where the family's based out of. Mm-hmm. And so as this nonprofit was really being built, the focus certainly was drastically more on that Eastern North Carolina community that they were involved in already as a family. what I can tell you is, as we began to establish that, I was part of that here in the Midlands of South Carolina. And really the direction given by our ownership was, hey, we want to find people that are doing excellent things that maybe need a hand. And if we can find excellent people that are doing remarkable things that need a hand, we probably can be that hand. And so let's go out, let's invest, let's find. And so that's really the backbone. I used the word organic earlier. That makes it really great, because I get to evaluate with a team of people, is this in the area of respect that we would want to invest, that we can be beneficial, and that we can see long-term commitment. And sometimes they're not necessarily long-term commitments, but they're valuable to the community. We've partnered as a company, even multiple ownerships of our company have partnered with the Riverbank Zoo. And they came a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and they wanted to redevelop the area that really focuses on local agriculture. And so out of all the things that are at the zoo, everything is kind of not able to be tasted and seen in a local environment. You got rhinos and you got giraffes, and those aren't things that Jim's got in his backyard that we know of. But
that you know of.
If any one of us three would, it would be him.
That we know of. But they really wanted to redevelop an area that a previous ownership had invested in and built, which was the farm area. And so now there are goats and there are chickens, and there are things that kids especially from an urban environment like Columbia can go, and they can be very hands-on, and they can have education that they wouldn't otherwise see. And the zoo was looking for a partner to continue to develop that so that it was more beneficial for our community. And, I think it's like 1.2 or 1.4 million people go through the zoo every year. And
I know, I could tell you, I could say thank you, because we have Zoo Pass. My kids will go. My grandfather, they always jokingly that he looks like a monkey. So they always go and hang out over there, and they call him Jerry Monkey, and so they have a lot of fun. But man, where everybody ends up at is in the farm area. Because you've got that opportunity. I mean, to me, it brings families together. Plus, like you said, I mean, I'm from Gilbert, so obviously the chicken farms and seed cow and this and that. But when you're out here in Columbia, it's not a common thing. So to be able to go somewhere like, wait a second, what do you mean I could actually touch? I could actually get up and close and personal. Man, I could tell you that impacts families every single day, where kids just want to go to the zoo. And that's one of the top two things, in my opinion, that they're wanting to see is like, man, let me get up and close with some farm animals.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you're probably 3 generations, maybe 2, depending on who you are in your family, from where your family lived on a farm, where you raised the majority of your food, or the community directly around you supported each other by raising the food that the people were going to eat. And so what we've become now is a very urbanized population, very commercialized farming industry. So very few now do it. Like 1% or 2% of people are in farming, even though rural Gilbert and rural Calhoun County are, 25 or 30 minutes away. The number of people that are invested in delivering the goods that are needed to put on the plate at our dining room are so few and so far between. And so when you begin to open up opportunities for kids to be able to come and say, this is what a chicken looks like before it goes to Chick-fil-A, or this is how an egg, comes about, and it's hard to believe that we're just so few years from when everybody knew it.
Isn't that crazy?
And now a kid doesn't understand that. We partner with a group called South Carolina Waterfowl Association, and they teach kids about, rural land management and waterfowl management, and what it looks like to be outside of a metroplex, right? And how we manage the land so that it allows itself to be beneficial, not only to our environment, but also to the animals that live there and things like that. And, those guys will tell you, 90% of the people have no clue what 10% of the people know. Wow. And so we have to do a good job of educating people so that they protect what they don't understand, and they have to trust us. And so the way they trust us is we have kids come out here in STEM programs, and we teach them about the land, and we teach them about management, and we teach them about these things, because otherwise everything that you hear is just negative, or, it's not as maybe aware as kids probably should be. And those kids are your future voters. Yeah. They're your future lawmakers, and so if they're educated in a way that they respect and they understand that there's a purpose behind what is done in rural America, well, that's valuable. So, anyway.
Yeah, one of the things that really resonates with me about the whole program that y'all do is having that community involvement and how much you're able to really, so for those of us who live in Columbia, everybody knows where the chicken plant is and all that stuff. And that's a pretty prime piece of real estate right on the river and all that stuff. And so, I know you've talked before about, we get complaints about different things and stuff like that. But being able to have that branch of the company that creates this big positivity and this big, big force in the community has got to be a really rewarding thing, and especially for you being able to really be neck deep involved in all that stuff. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way with seeing the impact of what y'all have made, or even with like going through a selection process of what things we want to be involved with?
Yeah. I'm very grateful because my private life, I've gotten to know remarkable people. And so when our company wanted to start being far more strategic and far more direct as far as their investment and their involvement, it really just became an addition to my personal life of where I was already involved and already partnering my family, our community, our church or whatever realm. And so it became one of those things that became very easy for us to kind of mesh in. And especially just those initial investments, being able to trust people as we developed, our own way of evaluating, the worthwhileness of our investment into these ministries or into these partnerships. And that's intimidating, when you're given the responsibility by, for me, a family, and they're saying, hey, please go and steward well this investment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that puts stress on my shoulders and my boss's shoulders to say, okay, how well can we do this so that it reflects well, not just on our company, the goal was never to make House of Raeford look great, maybe the icing on the cake is that people look and they say, you know what, we don't want necessarily a chicken plant in downtown West Columbia, but man, we're so grateful because they don't take it for granted being a part of our community. So maybe that's the icing on the cake. Yeah. The real push was to say, how well can we find and invest so that especially our team members, which it's very hard for me to walk in our production facility and address a specific need with an employee, right? That they have a specific need because we employ a lot of people and it's a fast-paced environment. But if I can look at organizations that their place of impact is in the areas of town or the areas of our community where I know some of our people live and reside and their kids go to school and these people have active opportunities to serve in those areas, then that's an easy yes. Okay, well now I can develop those partnerships and relationships and say, it's because you do well what you do for my people and you don't know they're my people. Yeah. That I can come in and say, we want to do well by you as well, so that it all works together. And that's, I don't know, there's kind of a circle of life kind of illustration I see in my head right now. Yeah. Where it's just like, because everybody gets benefited,
Yeah.
It all starts with somebody picking up the phone or taking out their wallet and, being willing to make a call or invest in the community. It sounds like you guys are doing that extremely well. Now, one thing we talked about prior to the podcast going live, our first time on air, and YouTube, and also we're celebrating that.
Camera.
That's right. That's right. But prior to that happening, we talked a little bit about you guys are apparently debate team champions, and I feel like the listening audience, they would love to hear a little bit more of this story of Jim in the debate team. So would you share and elaborate a little bit more about what I was privy to hear before this conversation?
So maybe we can tell it together. Okay. So before we get going on that too, I think in celebration of our first video podcast,
I get $1 million.
Oh, whoa!
Almost.
The check.
So if a compliment is $1 million, then yes. So I was thinking about who is the most handsome person that we can bring on, and Chuck, you're the first person to pop in.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
very much.
So it's like I think this is gonna bump us up to like 3 followers or something like that. So it's yeah.
I did my hair today. Can you tell me?
Yeah. All right. So that story. So we were talking about it beforehand. So Chuck and I have known each other for over 20 years now, and
it doesn't look like it.
Yeah. So. We always talk about, and with our relationship, you're the very much more talkative one, and I'm kind of sit back a little bit and take stuff in. And surprise, surprise, I was the same way. I was in college, and so
I was waiting to hear that you were the most talkative one.
So as part of our undergrad degrees, we had to fulfill a public speaking requirement. So Chuck and I decided to take a debate class together. And Chuck is a master he can talk to anyone all day. And I was complete opposite. So Chuck carried our team big time. And I actually tell this story to my staff every once in a while too, so we get up there, and we have I can't remember what we were debating about, but it was some kind of topic that was popular in society at that point. So I write out this one paragraph. I was like, this is what I'm going to say whenever I go up for my time. And we get it was like 6 minutes to talk or something like that.
Holy smokes.
So Chuck goes up there and he leads us off, and they have to cut him off because he's just like going and going and going. And then the other team comes up and
it was
says something.
It was a thing of beauty.
Man. I was like everybody's
Boom.
mouths were just like.
Did you create the mic drop? Were you the first to create said mic
somebody
drop?
came up after and they said, you should have dropped a mic. I think that would have been, and that's where it all started.
So then it comes my turn to go, and I've got my piece of paper and I've got my paragraph. It was a really well reasoned paragraph. But I get up there, I read it, and it takes me 20 seconds to read it. Then I was like, and so in my mind, when I'm writing this, I was like, okay, I can start with this, and I'll just kind of like expand on it. When I get up there, and I read it, and I just stand there. And I was like, I don't have anything else to say. So I'm like, I got to say something else. So I just read it again. It's so bad. And so Chuck, being the wonderful teammate he is sitting there laughing.
I tell you what, you motivator, you.
And so I just stand there for a minute or so more, and then I just go and sit down. And
I just want you to know, at this moment, I'm staring at him with my mouth hung open, like,
he's
this is all you brought.
Yeah,
we were shoe-ins for an A at the, when you went to stand up, and now,
hey,
lots of questions.
So I made my point was a big part of that.
Twice.
I've never imagined you. You think there's group projects, and it's a whole bunch of like talking one person into doing all the work.
Yeah.
I've never imagined you as one of the people that were, pushing off that work to someone else. Man.
It wasn't pushing it off. It was just more, it's more just like, that's all I had to say.
The work of speaking.
I can make my point.
Concise.
I'm not wasting words with stuff. But I think
twice. I forgot that.
Yeah. So that continues. It maybe gets a little bit better as the semester goes, but you carried us with all that. But so we progressed through that, and I think we've had conversations about this multiple times. Is like when we recognize there's something we're not good at, about how we want to approach that. And I'll kind of let you talk a little bit, because now it's like I'm taking.
Well, you've told the whole story from your perspective anyway. What ends up bringing it full circle was years later, Jeremy. I'm online. I'm scrolling through, and here's Jim, and he is being interviewed, or he's having a discussion online with somebody in his industry, and I click on it because I'm like, well, this has got to be like 30 seconds. Like, I know I've got experience. I know how this goes. And it was seriously like 90 minutes or longer of a conversation about their industry and about, the structure of things and how to make a clinic run, profitably from their perspective. And it was really remarkable. And I don't watch many things that are 90 minutes, but I watched the majority of it, and I texted him and I'm like, dude, I am so impressed. I just would never have thought that this would have been something. And he responded back to me, I realized I had a weakness. and that's something that I wanted to make a strength.
Man.
And I worked at it. And I've told that story to my kids as they've come up, and they're probably tired of it. But I'm like, listen, I can tell you about my weaknesses, but let me tell you about Uncle Jim's, story, and they're like, I get it, Dad. I get it. I used it on Charlie the other week,
What a great story, though. I mean, once again, it's not about the fact that you're not good at something. It's about the fact that you're willing to invest the time to grow. And it might be something that takes you 6 months, maybe 6 years. But there's folks that have watched that video that probably have a practice today because of that. And man, what if you had said, you know what? I'm going to let this. I've said the same thing twice. That's just not, God hasn't gifted me to speak or to do this. And I'm just not going to do that. Somebody would not be living their calling because you backed away instead of saying, you know what, I'm gonna open a book and I'm gonna really get after this, man. So I would say I can congratulate you on that.
That's thank you for that, and Chuck, thank you very much for those kind of words with that. But I think the big thing with that is, to recognize that weakness, and so that was not something like I wanted to be better, and so I had to force myself to do that, and you do that by. I made sure I was going to be put in situations where I was going to have to stand up in front of people and talk. And so when I had the opportunity to be able to teach a class while I was in grad school, I volunteered to do it. I'd never taught before, but I've got to get used to standing up in front of 30 people.
I would like to be your student, though. Stand up and read for 30 seconds. It's like class is dismissed.
It's like the shortest class ever.
It's like,
but then it ended up being a over 10-year journey of starting from that to taking every opportunity. So increasing the amount of people I'm talking to, or just a regular undergrad class, to being able to teach and to give a lecture in a med school to 150 people. And then ultimately, I think one of the culminations, honestly, the culmination is doing this podcast. It's not something I would have ever envisioned doing when I was in undergrad. But in going to a conference and doing a presentation for 2,500 people and standing up and being perfectly comfortable doing that. And it was more of me being intentional about making sure I did those things. And because, if I hadn't, then I'd just be at the same place.
Well, Chuck, the funny thing is you've seen the other side. I've met Jim at a networking event where he would have to stand up and he would have to speak. And I've always knew him as a man of little words, but when I was looking for someone to host a podcast with, he's who comes to mind. And so I think, it's so funny in that moment, had I met him there and walked away, never would have he possibly come to mind. But who he worked for those 10 years to become and where I met him in that, when I was ready to say, hey, it's time to bring this to life, he might be a man of few words, but in my mind, he's not scared to say. He doesn't have to say everything, because what he does say is really important and it's really wise to me. And so it's not that he has to go out and say 1,000 words, but I honestly never believed that he couldn't, And so it's so neat to see that. And awkwardly enough, I'm going to look into the lens that I was told not to do and say, hey, what are you struggling with and what can you accomplish? Because with hard work, anything's possible.
Yeah, and so thanks for that. I don't want to get this podcast going on a whole different direction because it's all about you, Chuck.
That's it.
And but for the audience out there, so whether you're listening or on the video now, what you didn't see of that is I had both slipped $20 bills to each.
That's right.
Each one of these guys. For saying all those different things too, but I appreciate that.
Payment, by the way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Much more was promised.
We're still in negotiations.
So that's so we got that. So I think it's a big thing. So yes, regardless of what we're doing, so we need to lean into those challenges if we truly want to get it better or something.
When you brought up your family, let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about family life. Talk about your personal life a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife's from Columbia. I'm a Connecticut Yankee originally. My folks moved to the Low Country when I was 10 years old, and I became a Gamecock fan through a good friend of Jim and mine, and somebody we actually both lived with at different times in our college career. And met my wife the first day that I was in Columbia. We didn't start dating for a couple of years after that, but actually, a fun story about that. Our first real date, we sat down and we decided the name of our first two children, but like before appetizers. So take that in. But we were at a place in life where we weren't looking to meddle around at all. We were looking for, the future. And I'm grateful for that. And I always wanted to have a son named Charles Edward Underhill IV because I'm a third, and that was a big thing for me. And so I asked her if that was something that she would be interested in, if this went the long haul, and she was like, absolutely. And if we're going to have a son named Charles, I'd like to have a daughter named Caroline. And so those are our first two names. And we actually have two sons and a daughter. We got a little guy, Jordan, who loves Michael Jordan and all things basketball and drumming currently. And he's, he is 8 years younger than my middle son, but he keeps us young, I think.
I would just say really quick, I love that confidence. Like, sit down, appetizers hadn't even been ordered yet. You're like, listen, I just need you to know. I just want you to know before we even get any further. This is, that is pure confidence. I can see why this man carried the debate team over here.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember the day that she walked in. We were both at a restaurant with a mutual group of people, and she walked in, and we had almost started dating about a year before. And I just remember that something being different when she walked in. And I joke with folks, we were at La Fiesta, which isn't open anymore in Casey. And I swear the Mexican music shut off, the lights dimmed, and Dreamweaver came on. And I thought to myself, man, I hope she sits down next to me. And she did, sat down next to me, and The Pursuit was on. And so by the time we got to that dinner.
We should bring that in. Bring a little Dreamweaver right there.
But when that happened, it was just different in my own mind already. So by the time we got to January and sitting down and kind of having a conversation, I was in for whatever because it was different. The pursuit was different. The reason for it was different, and for her too, And so 21 years later now, 20 and a half years later now, 3 kids. And so we live in West Columbia in between Krispy Kreme and Zesto's. So that's why I look the way I look. Thanks for the camera.
Were you the one that invented the donut chicken sandwich at the?
No, I wish. There's so many things I wish I had invented.
You're right,
I'm like,
there.
oh my goodness. Think about the size of my boat if I'd invented that.
We could have done this podcast at Krispy Kreme, people.
Dude,
why did we not think about this beforehand?
That happened. No, I'm just kidding. But no, and so yeah, we're just a local family. We go to local church, Christian Life Church over on Bush River Road, and we love our community there. And God's doing incredible things. And again, just reiterating kind of what I said earlier, when this opportunity came onto my desk for me to participate in, it mimics so closely the type of man and the type of perspective my family had because of really the impact the Lord had made on our life. And so when my company has a biblically based or a ministry based nonprofit, there really was no big transition in my mind. I really got the benefit to do more than what I could do on my own, and other opportunities that would not have come my way came my way to be able to impact. And then we work through a process of validating those things and making sure that they meet the markers that some people in our company want to make sure that we kind of focus in on. But they're so general and so generic. It really comes down to, do we have a passion for what we're being asked to be invested in? And if we do, that's usually, as long as the resources are there, that's usually a very easy yes.
Well, a key that you said a moment ago was that you were willing to be a part of something. Like, it wasn't this like, hey, I'm on my own mission. I'm a single man. I'm going to, I'm building my own rocket ship to the moon, and I'm no one else is getting credit for what I've built. You're like, hey, this is aligning what I'm doing. This is me. I'm not going to say I'm too proud to be a part of something. You know what I mean? And I think that's a very important thing that goes overlooked, because so many people feel like you have to be everything. Yeah. And it's being able to, like, teams win championships. But yet so often, even a golfer, like, you might say, well, they're the one hitting, their caddies just as an important part of that team. I mean, our golf expert over here would be able to probably agree with that, is that, they're the one hitting the shots, but the caddies Caddy's leading the way in several different areas. It's very rarely a solo effort as much as people would like to pretend that it is.
Yeah. And usually the solo efforts don't last very long.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have the longevity that you see in some others. And there's, especially in golf, I mean, there's so many people in the background.
That's why I had to tell Jim about 3 episodes into the podcast, he was ready to get rid of me. And I was like, dude, solo efforts don't last very long, dude. Solo efforts don't last very long.
No doubt.
He let me stay.
No doubt. But
I'll give you that $20 out of this.
Yeah. So so for our listeners out there, someone who's in a situation where they want to be more involved in things, are there some lessons learned that you have from going through these processes, or tips that you would have for people being able to identify, or just how would they be able to get started with stuff like that?
You know, I think the attitude of a generous heart is, if there's a foundation to lay, it's that, I want to be generous regardless of what I get in return, because at the very least you come into it with a good attitude. And I'm not saying that every investment that we've made has been right or been the best, or has turned out the way that we'd hoped, or has had the longevity that we had wanted to advise. And rightfully, maybe some of our partners have looked at us, from a partnership standpoint and said, man, we really wish that would have gone a different way. Maybe we missed the mark, in some of those relationships. But I don't think that there's ever a negative to a desire to be generous, a desire to be benevolent, and a desire to be good in the community that you're around. And that goes beyond the scope of what you can invest. I've told actually a friend of ours ministry, I gave this example. To me, it's very much like planting the seed of a grape tomato plant. And you think, how much could this one tiny little seed that you could barely see in the palm of my hand, what could be the potential of it? And you plant that seed, and if you give it the right, put it into the right situation with the right amount of water and the right amount of light, and all of a sudden, when you've got 1,000 grape tomatoes over the season, and you're like, you've run out of friends because no one wants them anymore,
like,
and they're like falling off in the yards, and all of a sudden you realize the outcome of benevolence and generosity, right?
Yeah.
When I am generous with little, even if it's little in my own eyes, or even if it's much, right? The impact that a little bit of generosity can have on the grand scheme is just, it's not able to monetize. And so your encouragement to do something because you saw it as valuable, even if it's small, maybe you're the one that somebody comes to and says, well, tell me about this organization, and they trust you because you have found time, whether it's financial or just time or, whatever. And so that would be, I would say, have a spirit, or have a feeling of generosity or benevolence that really propels you. The other thing is that if everything is about deposits in my bank, or in my physical spirit, or whatever, to make me feel good, then that's all me centered. And if I can turn that around, and a lot of what I do and how I am and who I am can be focused outwardly of me, then it gives me a totally different perspective on life. It's very much more easy to be able to see that life is bigger than just me, than just my family, because we're all going to go through difficulties and struggles. Our companies are going to go through difficulties and struggles financially or whatever. We're going to have hard things happen, but it's the response. Now, if the response comes out of a me-centered, lifestyle, well, all you've got to rely on then is me. And if me's crumbling, if me is struggling, if me's not there, then you're really on shaky footing. Flip side, if what I am is I'm a part of a community that is more vast than I even understand, and things get difficult, all of a sudden, all of that attitude of benevolence, and I believe this is the Lord, right? The Lord stirs in people's hearts then, and he sees the character to which you carry yourself and how you have responded and what you have done. And then he multiplies it back to you, right? And so as it comes back to you then in difficult seasons, and we've seen that, I can testify to that. I'm sure you guys in business can testify to that. You've walked into difficult situations, and all of a sudden it was because of an attitude of sacrifice that you had in other situations in life, that somebody came and jumped in and said, come on, and maybe even people in this room, benefit from that, where, you're sitting there and you're like, I didn't have a way to make this work, but all of a sudden a door opened.
Yeah, well, and as a business owner too, like, I don't know about you guys, but there's so many times before I was in the position that I am now, there's so many times I was like, if I were in that position, I would do this. Or if I had the authority, I would do that. Or, until you're obedient with what you have, number one, you can't pretend that just because you acquire X, you would do, Y, Z. You know what I mean? Like, but to me, it's like now in some of those moments I'm in that spot. And I'm like, Jeremy, you said you would do this. Or Jeremy, you said you would do that. Like, are you going to actually be about it, or are you lying to yourself?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter what you act like. It matters what you do.
Oh, yeah.
And man, like, sometimes that's a good gut-wrenching check to myself to say, what are your real intentions? Are, as you grow, or your value shifting? No, then do what you said you were going to do.
Right.
You know?
it breaks it down. Jeremy, if you're really a family man, do you protect the families of the people that work for you?
Yeah.
Do you protect those marriages? Do you protect those kids?
Yeah.
Do you step in if somebody's having a difficult time and give them extra PTO because they desperately need to go invest in something at home or take care of something? Or is it just about your bottom line? Well, if it's just about your bottom line, then really we're just focusing on ourselves, right? But if you invest in the people around you, if you see the benefit of that, if you touch and feel it, you're part of the success in that. And whether or not in the short term you see the results of that, long term, you'd have to argue with me a long time to get me any kind of sway to believe that there is not long term value to that. And I believe it's very much that the Lord trusted you with little, you did as much as you could with it. He returned a lot to you. And so I sit there and I say, okay, well, here's the sphere of influence that I believe I've been given. That God has allowed me. Let me be as wise and as structured and as good as I can be. And I believe that it'll return greatly. And I believe that's the ownership of my company. They sit there and they said, we've got a responsibility. We notice that now. Now they had a choice, and when they noticed it, they could either turn and say, no, profits over, over benevolence. And what they said in regard was, no, of course, as a business, we have to be structured to be paying attention to profits, but benevolence has to become a forefront of who we are. Otherwise, we're really nothing.
If we see a benevolence over profits podcast come out after this, listen here, man.
Let's do it.
I'm like, listen here, man. We need some trade. We need some.
I like.
I think it's just everything circles back around.
Yeah,
and
it's absolutely true.
You put good out there, it's going to come back.
At the end of the day, all of us are going to sit there one day, hopefully old and gray, and we're going to have opportunity to, just look back on what we did with the time on this dirt that we got, and if all of it ever was emptiness and self-seeking, I don't know that there's a whole lot of gratitude in that, just even for our own trip, on earth. But when we get to look back and see, the lives that we changed, the investment that we made, the encouragement that we gave. I mean, like Jim and I have a mutual friend who's in school right now, and he's encouraged to be where he is because he came in contact with somebody that was willing to invest in him and give him the fortitude to go and do something that was out of the box from what he was thinking.
Wow.
And so you sit there and you say, that's one family. How much does that one family change now because Jim made such a positive impact? Well, the only reason way he got to Jim is because he first ended up in my living room, and I cared about him and I loved him and I wanted to see the very best for him. And so an opportunity came, I called Jim and said, hey, I got somebody for you that's going to be a value to your business. Yeah. No, with no strings tied to how the outcome would be. Yeah. Wow. But I just knew that I could send him to somebody that would benefit him in the long run and benefit his family. Yep. And, and the story's still being written, but it's good, and it's remarkable. And so, when you got that kind of mentality, when you're doing a podcast for the benefit of your listeners, so that it hopefully encourages them to be better after than they were before, and not just more profitable, but, better as a whole, man, that's good. If your company's smaller, but you're a better person, you're a better family man, you're a better wife, you're a better, better husband, better father, man, I say that's better.
It's winning.
Yeah, that's winning. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, as we dial in on time, I know that we're getting towards the end of the episode here. Wanted to ask you before we find out how people can challenge you to debates and meeting you in a public settings. Is there something, book or, like maybe a podcast that you listen to, or something that maybe an event you've been to, something that you would give to our entrepreneurs out there to say, hey, this is something that's been helpful to me that I'd love to share with you?
What's funny is you kind of alluded to that earlier before we started. Something that kind of changed for me. I was on a trip to LA, and on the flight movie thing, there was a documentary called The Biggest Little Farm. This is just out of right field, whatever. But the Biggest Little Farm is a documentary about a 200-acre farm near LA, that these people just had a vision to go and start something, and what was born out of it is really just. You just can't imagine. Go check it out. I think you got to rent it. Okay. I think it's on Amazon, maybe $3 or $4. You can rent it. It's worth the time.
Absolutely well worth it.
Yeah. So but the cool thing about it is that there is a balance to everything. And the folks that started the farm, they were interviewed. I followed them. I follow them on social media, and they were. This interviewer came up to them and said, "Hey, this is 7, 8, 10 years in, and the farm is incredible and doing really well, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's almost like an Eden, Mm-hmm. And the interviewer said, I was told before I came out here to try the eggs, that they were just unbelievable. And the interviewer saying, and I didn't understand, because they're just eggs. But I came out here and I tried the eggs, and they're the best I've ever eaten. But they're always sold out. The store where you sell them is always sold out. Why don't you just get more chickens?" And the owners of the farm say, because it would throw off the balance of the farm. The farm can sustain this many. And if we get more, it throws off the seesaw of the farm and how everything works together. And so even though in our entrepreneurial minds, we would say, hey, profits, we can increase revenue over here. Let's blow this out. What happens is, does that prohibit growth or allowing the sustainability of everything else around? And so I highly recommend watching the documentary, but I really want to encourage folks that in everything there's a balance.
Yeah.
There's a personal investment. There is a personal sacrifice. There is a work benefit. There's a work sacrifice. Again, if at the end of the day you come out and all you ever know about yourself is that you're an insurance guy and you're a doctor of physical therapy and I sell chicken, we've missed it. There's a balance. My children bear the burden if I'm not a good father.
Man, that's good
My
stuff.
wife bears the burden if I am not a good husband. My church bears the burden if I don't co-labor with them for the purpose and cause that they have been created by God. My business bears a burden if I don't go and do my very best to be a great representative of who they've hired me to be and what they desire to be, and the trustworthiness of, in my position, the trustworthiness of an ownership to say, here are these resources, go and steward well.
Well, this has been an incredible time, and I absolutely understand why you'd bring Chuck on the podcast. I mean, how can people get involved with the organization? Really quick before we end this, as we're at the end of our time, what's the best way people can get in touch with you and your organization?
Yeah, well, you can certainly check out our webpage. houseofraeford.com is the webpage for the entirety of our company.
Great.
We have locations in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Louisiana. You can reach out to me, Chuck.Underhill at houseofraeford.com. That's probably the easiest way.
Okay.
And I'll do my very best to get back to you. But man, I really appreciate it, guys. You guys have been great hosts.
Yeah, we've had a great time.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. It's
Absolutely.
been awesome.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, everyone awkwardly looking to the camera as it ends.
Please tell your friends to like and subscribe. Okay.